This is Mandatory Listening. I'm your host, Kent Mann. Each week, we sit down over a cup of coffee and discuss interesting topics in the world of the customer experience. Hello, and thanks for tuning in. You're listening to Mandatory Listening, the podcast with the most clever name out there. This morning, I'm joined today with Christie, who lives out in San Francisco, and he's the owner of Summit Bicycles. Hey, Ian.
Hey, how are you?
Doing good. It's noon my time, but I think it's 9 your time. So you've still got coffee on the agenda, maybe?
Yeah.
Oh, man. Did you just get up?
No. I've corralled a number of kids and animals to get them on their way for the day. Now I'm getting to mine.
Yeah, you've got a house full of children. What's the age of your three girls?
So I have, 3 girls, 8, 6, and 2.
Jeez.
So it's not boring at all.
So you've owned Summit Cycles for how long now?
It's been about 8 years.
Wow.
Yeah, right about 8
and
years.
You're a pretty young guy.
I've actually worked. This was technically my first job. When I was 13, I started just cleaning the bathrooms and worked my way up the ladder, and then put together a ownership transition plan in place with the previous owner, which that took about 3.5 years. And that was about 8 years ago when that was done. So it's interesting to have only ever worked in this business and see how much it's changed. Even in the last 5 years, how much it's changed.
Have you changed through a lot of employees, or do you still have people that are working there from when you were working?
There's certainly turnover. There's no question. We just went through not gear training, but Man U with your father, Dan Mann, and it was with all of our managers in our operations center. And he went through and had everyone introduce themselves. And I was actually, I know this, but to hear it back to back to back, I don't think there was one manager there that hadn't been with me for 5 years or more.
Wow.
And there were a number of
impressive.
8 pluses. Yeah. So we're pretty lucky in that sense. It's, I think we've developed a culture where at least the management has seen that they can make a living off of it and have a fulfilling career.
And I think that leads us right into today's topic, which is compensation, which I don't think any owner wants to talk about. But it's a important conversation if you want to have people stay with you for 5 years or 8 years or 10 years. I think that's important, like you said, for creating a culture of management that wants to stick around and be compensated for their hard work.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. So before we get into that, I wrote down a couple things just to get to know you a little better. What kind of music do you listen to?
I'm more of a repeat guy. And it's funny, I just read this article that said once you're over 30, you stop listening to new music. And I'm kind of sad to say that I'm fulfilling that study very well. My biggest repeat one, or what I listen to in the gym, is mostly 90s grunge rock. It's like Stone Temple Pilots and Pearl Jam and Smashing Pumpkins and Nirvana and Soundgarden and Rage Against the Machine and all that stuff.
That's the perfect gym music, I think.
Yeah, exactly. But I listen to pretty much all genres. I'd say country is probably the least listened to, but I kind of cover everything. So I grew up playing music.
Oh, okay. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
What'd you play?
A little bit of everything. I played guitar, I played drums, played baritone, but drums is what I like to play. I was never really any good at any one particular instrument. I just kind of covered them all really horribly. So
you've got a musical mind then, because most people can't play one. So
yeah, that's my life.
So when you say country music, you don't mean bluegrass or folk music.
No. I mean, even
tractors and lifted trucks and
correct. And it's really the more poppy country music I don't listen to.
I think the bluegrass scene has really had a resurgence in the last couple of years. So country has kind of a different name now.
Yeah, no. So
it's like you said, it's the pop country.
Exactly. Yeah. And even the classics, like the John Denvers and, all that stuff, that stuff's good. We listen to that. But bluegrass is actually one of our favorite musics to watch live, because typically the musicians that tour in that genre are so talented. When you go to a live show for someone who's really mastered their craft, it's not like anything else. So
yeah, I agree with you 100%. When Hank and I went to a concert in Canada this past summer, and it was kind of full spectrum music festival where there's rap, there's bluegrass, there's alternative, whatever. And just the difference in skill level from like the Foo Fighters versus like Little Yachty is completely different. Like the amount of like the rock artists are like sweating, and then the rap people are like are barely even doing anything.
Yeah.
So anyway, I think the live music is where it really shines.
Yeah.
So moving on, what got you into bike riding besides just working at the place, was that it?
The number one thing that got me into Summit Bicycles, or the job per se, was I wanted money, and my parents wouldn't give it to me. So I needed to get a job.
Sounds like good parents.
Yeah, I know. Exactly. It was funny. It was like the best thing they could have ever done. So I loved bikes. I raced bikes, being 10, 11, 12, 13. That was my main source of freedom and transportation. So the passion for bikes was certainly there, but I wanted to buy stuff. That was really it. Like that was
nice.
That was totally it. So my best friend's dad owned it was actually 3 shops at the time. The closest one was in, 20 miles or so from my house, but my dad was willing to drive me there, which was nice.
So yeah, did you grow up in San Francisco?
No, actually. So I live in Santa Cruz, which is about an hour south of San Francisco. I always get referred to as the San Francisco dealer because it's the greater Bay Area. And the shops go quite a bit north. Burlingame's only about 15 minutes, 20 minutes away from the city, like downtown San Francisco. So the Bay Area is really this hodgepodge of 10 to 15 different cities with 1 million plus people living in them.
Definitely. Yeah, it's crazy. I every time I go out there, it's culture shock. And it's, exact opposite side of the country for me. So anyway, all right, let's get into compensation now that we've gotten to know each other a little more.
Sure.
So I wrote down a couple questions just regarding compensation, and hopefully that'll guide us to a productive conversation. This is the second installation of our compensation podcast, but let's just start with, like, how does commission affect employee behavior?
It changes it, that's for sure. The one thing that commission has outlined or highlighted for us, is that it really only leaves us with the people who are motivated to sell.
Right.
They have an invested interest in moving product and making them money and making you money. Right. Whereas the person, whenever we talked about historically now, when we have talked about introducing compensation or commission into the compensation plan, the people that have always given us resistance are the people who honestly we don't want on the team for a number of different reasons. But the person that's willing to bet on themselves and understand that risk and that they have some sense of control or greater control in their pay are the people who honestly are going to help Summit Bicycles grow and who have helped Summit Bicycles grow. So our managers have been on heavy commission, say even most of them like 100% commission for 4+ years, 5+ years. And in the last 2 years or so, we've moved everyone to have some sort of commission in their pay. So I would say that the majority of the staff underneath our management team is on an hourly plus commission. The one thing that's interesting there is that they don't do the math very well in terms of like understanding how much they sell and what that's going to equate to. So we've had to go through the practice of like basically communicating it in an hourly dollar per hour based on obviously contingent upon their performance and that sort of thing, which is fine. We're happy to do that. But the ones who are still like, yeah, no, we're good with commission are the ones that don't have issues selling stuff. And it's not like some huge shock right after the fact, but it's kind of a good way to kind of weed out or at least highlight the employees that, may not be the best fit for a company that's interested in growing their sales.
Yeah. And I think you said something earlier that I just want to highlight, that you said that the employees are betting on themselves. They're not afraid. I would say probably most of the people that either got moved to a commission structure or heard that you have a commission structure got excited by it because they know that I can do this. I believe in myself. I'm going to bet on myself. I can make as much money as I want.
Yeah.
I think it scares owners to have a commission-based structure, but it really shouldn't. And each industry, the bike industry, outdoor run, they're all different. But I think it's like almost a hiring issue.
Correct.
Like hiring people that can take that risk. Along those same lines, with scaring owners or being afraid of spending too much money on payroll, what's the point or the benefit or the goal of setting a payroll percentage on your financial statement? Like, let's say I want my payroll to be 12% of my revenue.
I mean, there's a huge benefit. To be honest, I'm not sure you can be financially healthy if you don't set that goal or have that number in mind or have that budgeted in some sense. I mean, payroll's the largest expense by far, and not only just the largest expense, but the most important in terms of what you get in return for what you spend there. I mean, any good company can be always tracked back to the quality of its staff, which is your payroll and your P&L. So, I mean, to simply answer the question, it's super important. The rhetoric part of me is like, if there's anyone listening to this that doesn't have a payroll percentage number for their payroll, you may be screwed. So get that number in your mind, or get that budgeted for sure.
So I know in the last compensation recording we did, Dan mentioned that if you set your commission structure for, let's say, a certain type of employee at 8%, then their payroll percentage only ever stays at 8%.
Correct.
And I don't think, we've gotten questions about that, and we've gotten, some people don't fully understand, but it's just setting it to where, like, if you have 100% commission and it's 8%, that means for that employee, that payroll is only 8% of the revenue that they bring in.
Yeah. I mean, that's spot on.
It's a little complicated when you say it, but it's very simple.
Yeah, it's super simple. And I've heard Dan reference that example many times. And the rebuttal that I always see or hear is like, oh, what about the service department and blah, 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 blah. And the thing with the service department is you can still effectively pay them on commission, right? I mean, commission is just performance-based pay, right? And we only ever think of it in terms of sales. So there's a very easy way to quantify a mechanic's performance outside of the sales dollars that they do generate, that they should get commission on. So yeah, that 8% model is really interesting. And from what I recall Dan expounding on in that example is that the staff is really, really good, right? Like, they get it.
Yeah.
They know their role and how they play into it. There's no, customer facing competition for sales and so on and so forth. So you can run your payroll like that, like 100%. I mean, if bike shops had their payroll at 8%, that would be absolutely crazy. I mean, I think the national average is something in the 20s or 21s, which is over,
Yeah, definitely.
Approaching, depending on your gross margin, that's 50% of your profits right there. So
yeah, and I think people just get scared away because they don't want to have to make this big meeting and big announcement that, hey, we're moving to a commission-based structure.
Yeah.
And then you're going to have these all, defensive employees be like, what are you doing? And potentially have to fire someone over a pay structure change.
Yeah.
Because they don't want to play ball.
Yeah.
So how do you mitigate that?
You let them go. Yeah. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You don't mitigate it, really. That it's not a good fit. Like, anyone that isn't willing to have their pay based on their performance is not someone you want in your organization. Like, plain and simple. It's not. I don't know. It's not rocket science. And I understand.
We talked to
avoid it. So rip the Band-Aid off.
We talked to a ton of companies that, will say things that may not be very popular, or say things that, you just got to let them go in this situation. Like, they're not serving you, and people, fight back or come back with, it's not part of our company culture. That's not part of who we are. That's not part of who I am as a leader. And I'm like, yeah, but you also have to make money. It's not like you're a handout company.
Yeah.
And so, having accountability attached to it, having results attached to it, and having the responsibility of, I make my own money based on how I work on the sales floor. I'm not just a body with hourly dollars thrown at me because I'm just standing here.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's not the way. Yeah. It's not the way retail is going to be.
Yeah, absolutely. And
yeah, so
I'm not saying just run in there and yell at everyone and don't talk about it, sort of thing. But like, commission's good for good employees. They make more money. Like, can be presented in such a way that you're attempting to make them understand that this is good for them as well, right? Like, you guys are on a team, right? And the team is, let's go make some money. Let's do it. So
Yeah, for sure. And if you can't live with that in that world, then being on a sales floor, emphasis on the word sales, is probably not the type of career you need to be in.
Exactly.
So, yeah. And I think a lot of people forget that. So, I think we've answered my next question. I wrote down, how would you, Ian, want to be paid if you worked the floor tomorrow? And I think it's pretty clear that you would want to be put on commission.
Absolutely.
Unless I'm mistaken. You want like a minimum wage type deal? And
No, I'm good.
Probably.
I'll take 10%.
Yeah.
I want 10%
Okay,
of all
so
my sales.
yeah. So we answered that question. So what is the difference between good service and like typical car salesman behavior that everyone cringes at?
I think that at least the cliche perception that we have of like car salesmen is getting the sale regardless of how the customer feels. It may work in that industry because it's so, I mean, it's a huge purchase that you maybe do every 5 to 10 years or something like that. Whereas, I mean, the difference with us is I could literally think of a customer that I have seen 6 separate times in the last 2 days. And it was a positive thing. It wasn't like she was coming back for, something we messed up, like 6 separate times in 2 days. And we can't get the sale at the cost of the customer's feelings. So their experience and the feelings and sensations that they have after shopping in our business are absolutely crucial. So, getting their phone number, no matter how awkward it is, so we could cold call them later when something's on sale, isn't worth it, in the long run or even short run.
Yeah.
That's just going to alienate them to never want to come back in because they're just being harassed. So
for sure.
Yeah, good service is absolutely crucial. And it's creating an environment that customers are comfortable and feel welcome coming into. And I think most people would respond that they are not comfortable walking onto a car lot. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah, you're almost always on the defensive.
Yeah, you're guarded. And most people are in retail in general because we've been taught that, right? When we ask people, oh, what bike do you ride now? It's just engaging customers in a conversation to make them feel welcome. So,
well, that's right up your alley, I think, because we really enjoyed walking into your store. We didn't feel like we were on a car lot.
Yeah, thank God.
Well, maybe we did, depending on how much I want to offend you today.
Thanks.
All right, so since you're on almost the opposite side of the world from me, and just the United States, does your customer base or location affect how you should pay your people? Like the culture of the city, let's say in your case, the amount of support the city has for biking in general. How does that question land?
So I would say no, but there's exceptions only in the case, or I should say we've experienced exceptions. Like when we've opened new stores, I've moved like a seasoned manager to that store and I've had to like protect some sort of base pay because the sales aren't being a brand new store, it's going to take 2 to 3 years to get the sales to a certain point where we could work out a percentage that's going to be 100% commission. So that's really the only instance in which we've really made it different. But to the heart of your question, in terms of different stores in different cities that are already established, no, they're the same. It's funny, we have 2 stores that are dramatically different than the other 3, but they do just as much business. They'll sell their average bike sale price is like a good 30 or 40% more, but they sell 30 or 40% more units. So, there's many ways to skin a cat, but for us, we pay them with the same commission structure.
Okay. And how do you determine, is it by tenure that you determine what their hourly versus commission is, or is it just like individual base? Like the people who want to be on more commission choose to be 100% commission versus someone who, wants more hourly.
Yeah. So the standard operating procedure that we've, like when we're hiring someone new, and we've typically presented them with 2 or 3 different pay structures, right? So all of them include some sort of commission, but there will be like one that's hourly plus commission, and then one that's more heavily weighted commission, and then the last one's all commission. So when we present that, we'd also tell them, if 12 months from now you want to switch, that's fine, but you have to switch 12 months from now. You can't come in, realize you're a superstar, and then, switch it up because the math works in your favor at that particular point. But
Yep.
it's also kind of a good sign when we hire the person on which option they pick. So, and then we've had it where they've switched at that 12-month mark, and then we see the sales go up and then their paychecks go up. So we've also seen it work where someone's a little more cautious at first, especially with a new job. They don't, they're not familiar with us or our culture or systems. So I definitely understand some hesitancy to go 100% commission, but it's in every pay structure now. Like it's almost like a little micromanager in their paycheck, to be completely like honest. Like, yeah,
that's awesome.
It's perfect, and you need it.
Yeah. So off that same line, for people who are underperforming, or they went into let's say they went all commission and they realized like, oh, this isn't like my last job, or this isn't X, Y, or Z, so I'm not doing as well. How do you know the difference, or how do you balance those three of like, all right, your personality is lacking here, you need to be more assertive, you need to be, I guess it's kind of the same question of training. Like, how do you determine if this person just needs to be trained or it was a bad hire?
I mean, you kind of get an idea whether or not it's a bad hire pretty early on, or at least I feel like I do. But we still do exhaust every training option and educational point that we can, implement before we terminate. We tend to be pretty exhaustive before we let someone go for a number of different reasons. One, it's hard to find people in the Bay Area. And then two, it's to be human in some sense. And, we don't want to fire people, but, we're not here to just hand out paychecks. They do need to perform. So the other thing too is that
and I know
that we've come across is sometimes the role that they're in is just not the right role for them, or the role that they wanted at the beginning, or that we thought that they would do well is just not a good fit. Like, we've definitely transitioned people and then they've, blossomed. So that takes a little bit more hands-on work, which is absolutely worth it. But if you're going through in the training and they're hitting all the marks, and yet their numbers are still not there, then it's just not a good fit. Now, whether that means the fit is within the specific department of your company or just your company in general, you gotta figure that one out on you. So
yeah, you got to have some standards. Well, and I know also there are parts of the country, and I guess world too, but in California specifically, where it can be very difficult to fire someone unless you have, your 10-step reasons or 10-step process for termination. And you can sometimes come back and bite you if you don't have all your ducks in a row.
Yeah, we've had very few instances where that's been where we've had to deal with that.
Well, it's easy to hear from the grapevine, and I'm sure it's exaggerated.
Yeah. But to your point, in those instances, we did not have our ducks in a row. You know what I mean? Like, that was definitely a learning experience for us as a company. Like, what's so funny in the two instances that come to mind, it was we were being too nice. Like, in both the situations, it was so funny. Like, the ones where we ended up getting, challenged on or anything like that, it was because, anyway. But you gotta follow the rules. You gotta have the right paperwork, so on and so forth.
All right. So how about when it comes to bonuses? Do you believe in bonuses, incentives for bonuses? And then the follow-up question, incentives for selling specific items or brands. There are some brands that'll come forward and say, we'll give employees X, Y, or Z for selling this. That kind of same question, like bonuses. What do you think?
Yeah. So bonuses specific to products, different vendors will approach us and they have spiffs in situations where you sell this bike, you get $100 or whatever. And those work. The bonuses that we've had the best success with is when we've one, it's a standing bonus for 6 months or more. It seems like if it's too short, they tend not to get engaged, or they don't change their habits enough to, really benefit on the bonus side. And then the habit doesn't stick. So they have no reason to try. But bonus programs that are 6 months or longer, and we've done it where, if we're really targeting a specific metric, add-ons per bike or something like that, that's worked. We have bonuses for a number of our staff where if they hit specific profit goals, and we've heavily incentivized that bonus. So if they hit their goal, they get a pretty good sized check at the end of the month. And the
Nice.
commission always stays the same, right? The percentage of sales, blah, blah, blah. But in terms of like really driving profit center forward, the bonuses on the goals probably help more than anything else.
The reason I asked that question is because I've worked a job where a vendor would come in and say, or if they'd have like a demo day or something like that, we would be incentivized to bring out that brand every single sale, like every single shoe fitting, or, we'll get X, Y, or Z if we sell this many in a week, that kind of thing. And so from that, I know bikes are a little different, but it always felt a little weird to me because it's, what if someone's being pushed into the wrong product because of the employee's behavior?
Yeah, and maybe that's another reason why they don't work. It's interesting though, like at least the vendor bonus programs that stand out in my mind are like, $10,000 bikes. So I couldn't imagine a customer being strong armed into a $10,000 bike. And then, it kind of begs the question, why have a bonus at all? You know what I mean? Like if they're going to spend 10 grand on a bike, they're going to spend 10 grand on a bike. I've seen it, and it kind of to your point, it does get the staff talking about it. And I think the goal is to have that be a lasting habit, because that we struggle with that when we've enacted changes in terms of our sales process or capturing customer email. Like changing our employees' habits and their verbiage is really hard to get them to change how they do that. I think that's the effort, but it's also super difficult. And I don't have the silver bullet for it. That's for sure.
So I guess doing a bonus the correct way can be an effective way to change verbiage or behavior or small habits. And I guess as well in the bike industry too, to your point, the $10,000 bike was going to get bought probably no matter what. So yeah, it was just interesting because I was trying to find a parallel between the run industry versus the bike industry for incentives.
I've seen it with like glasses and stuff like that. And yeah, but that would be my concern as well. We've never done it on specific products. We've always been super general about it. And the gross profit bonus we've had huge success with. Sorry, I sounded like the president there saying huge. But yeah.
Was there a Y at the front? Huge. Yeah. All right, now we're talking politics. This is the politic hour.
Yeah.
So last question here, and you may have already answered. I think you touched on it briefly. Is there a concern or should people be concerned, depending on their employees, about commission creating in-house competition, like creating competition amongst your coworkers?
Yes, and you want that. I think there's a fine line between.
So is there a concern behind it?
Yeah. So there's a fine line between healthy competition and staff that are being assholes, right? So competition, absolutely. But if they're being a hazard to a healthy workplace environment, to me that's a whole separate category. I know that the question kind of encompasses both, but like that. Again, that's a bad fit or a behavioral change that needs to be seriously addressed. The one thing that we were pretty clear about that when we enacted commission for everyone, but we were like, you will be written up if there's any, sort of issue surrounding customers, like you have to work with me. It's sort of thing. Like the whole forward-facing or customer-facing competition cannot take place whatsoever. So, and we've had zero issues with customers. We've had one issue with a staff member, and he did correct it, and to give him credit. So,
wow.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it can be hard to fire that number one salesman, because he's an asshole to the other employees or whatever. So what was your process for resolving that issue, just from a general sense?
A JWD, right? I mean, we effectively, right?
Yeah.
We didn't serve him a crap sandwich. So, it's people that don't know, Kent's dad came up with acronym JWD, which stands for job worth doing or job well done. And it's basically how to talk to your staff in a specific format to make sure that they understand the contribution and how it's important to the business, which in this sense would be a healthy workplace environment, or how their actions cause there not to be a healthy workplace environment. And then it addresses their approach, which means what are they going to do to change it and make sure that they are not being a detriment to a healthy workplace environment, and then checking in on the results. So that's exactly what we did with that staff members. We sat them down and we had a JWD conversation.
Wow. Well, thank you, Ian, for plugging our little product there, a little acronym.
For sure.
We did not tell him to do that.
No, you did not.
Your check's on the way.
Yeah.
Well, cool. So so compensation. I know a lot of people were having issues with our last podcast recording about it. Each company is different. Each culture is different. But if you have a plan in action and you're willing to take accountability and results seriously when it comes to changing your pay structure, and you create that environment, not only will your employees be better paid, your payroll percentage will be a little more stable and a little lower, but you'll also find that the sales floor can actually become a more vibrant environment. So thank you, Ian, for talking to me about this. It was eye-opening, and I'm going to have to go back and re-listen to this one a couple times to hear everything again. Was there anything else you wanted to add there at the end?
No, I'm good. That was it. Yeah, thank you for having me. I'm flattered.
Well, good. Well, of course, man. Of course. So thank you. And I'm sure you have a better weather in San Francisco than we do in North Carolina. And I'll try not to dream of it too much.
Yeah. Don't look it up on the weather app. All right.
Yeah, I'll try not to. All right, man. Well, thank you. And to all our listeners, we'll talk to you soon. That's it for this episode. If you like what you hear, subscribe and leave a review on our iTunes channel. We'll see you next week.